The wind howled across the frozen wasteland of Tundra 7 like a living thing, carrying ice crystals that could cut through metal. Tom pulled his thermal suit tighter around his body as he stepped off the transport shuttle with 30 other cadets from across the galaxy. The Galactic Military Academy had brought them here for one reason: to face the legendary ice wall that had broken the spirit of countless warriors before them. Tom watched his alien classmates emerge from the shuttle. The cliques moved in perfect formation, their insect-like bodies covered in shimmering chitin that clicked softly as they walked. Their compound eyes reflected the pale light of Tundra 7's distant sun like thousands of tiny mirrors. Behind them came the voids, beings of pure energy barely contained within humanoid force field projections that flickered and pulsed with inner light. Last came the granite people, massive beings whose rock-like skin looked tough enough to stop. Plasma bolts, all of them possessed abilities that far exceeded human capabilities. The cliques could process information at incredible speeds and had reflexes faster than any organic being had a right to possess. The voids could phase through solid matter and manipulate energy with their thoughts alone. The granite people were virtually indestructible, their stone bodies able to withstand temperatures and pressures that would crush lesser beings instantly. Tom was just human. No special powers, no evolved advantages, no natural armor or energy manipulation. Just flesh and blood and a brain that refused to quit thinking about problems until it found solutions. "There it is," whispered Rek, one of the clique cadets, his mandibles chattering with what Tom had learned was their equivalent of nervous laughter. "The ice wall." Tom followed his gaze and felt his breath catch in his throat. The wall rose from the frozen ground like a monument to impossibility. 300 meters of solid permafrost and ice stretched upward, its surface gleaming like polished metal in the weak sunlight. The wall wasn't just tall. It was perfectly vertical, offering no natural handholds or ledges. Worse, it seemed to radiate cold so intense that the air around it shimmered with ice crystals. "No one has ever climbed it," said Vel, a void whose energy form pulsed with what Tom recognized as fear. "Not in 800 years of Academy history. The cold alone will kill most organic beings within minutes of direct contact." Instructor Dag, a four-armed creature from the spiral arm sectors, gestured toward the wall with two of his appendages, while the other two held recording devices. "The Ice Wall Challenge is not about conquest. It is about understanding your limitations. Every species that has joined the Academy has sent their best warriors to face this wall. All have learned the same lesson. Some obstacles cannot be overcome through force or technology or evolution." Tom stepped closer to the wall, ignoring the gasps from his fellow cadets. The cold hit him like a physical blow, but he kept walking, until he was close enough to touch the ice. Through his thermal gloves, he could feel the wall's surface. It wasn't smooth like it appeared from a distance. The ice had a complex structure, with layers built up over centuries of freeze-thaw cycles. There were tiny cracks and imperfections that the naked eye couldn't see from more than a few meters away. "Human Tom, step back," ordered Instructor Dog. "Prolonged exposure at that distance will cause tissue damage." But Tom didn't move immediately. He was studying the wall's composition, noting how the ice caught and reflected light, observing the patterns of frost that had formed in the cracks. This wasn't just a wall of ice. It was a structure with weak points and stress patterns, just like any other engineering challenge. "I volunteer to attempt the climb," Tom said, his voice carrying clearly in the thin air. The silence that followed was so complete that Tom could hear the ice crystals settling on his thermal suit. Then the cliques began that rapid mandible chattering. That meant they were either laughing or having nervous breakdowns. The void's energy forms flickered wildly with shock. Even the usually stoic granite people made rumbling sounds deep in their chest cavities that Tom had learned meant they were experiencing strong emotions. "Human," said Instructor Dog carefully. "Perhaps you did not understand. This wall has defeated beings with natural immunities to cold. It has stopped creatures who can manipulate matter at the molecular level. Technology that can reshape planets has failed against this obstacle. You are—" He paused, clearly struggling to be diplomatic. "You are biologically unsuited for this environment." Tom turned away from the wall to face his instructor and classmates. "That's exactly why I need to try. Everyone who has attempted this wall has been trying to use their natural advantages or their technology to overpower it. Maybe the problem isn't that the wall is unconquerable. Maybe the problem is that everyone has been trying to conquer it the wrong way." Rex's compound eyes swiveled to focus on Tom with laser intensity. "Your species has no natural defenses against extreme cold. Your flesh will freeze solid within minutes of direct contact with that ice. Your blood will crystallize in your veins. My species survived ice ages that lasted thousands of years," Tom replied. "We didn't do it with chitin armor or energy manipulation or stone skin. We did it by being smarter than the environment that was trying to kill us." Vel's energy form pulsed with disbelief. "You cannot think your way past the laws of physics, human. Cold is cold, ice is ice. Biology has limits that intelligence cannot overcome." Tom smiled, and something in that expression made several of the alien cadets step backward. "That's where you're wrong. Intelligence isn't just about processing information faster or calculating trajectory vectors. Real intelligence is about seeing problems differently than everyone else has seen them before. It's about refusing to accept that something is impossible just because everyone says it is." He looked back at the ice wall, already beginning to formulate plans. "Besides, who says I'm going to fight the cold? Maybe the trick is to make the cold work for me instead." The alien cadets exchanged glances that conveyed confusion and concern in equal measure. They had no idea what the human was planning, but something about his confidence in the face of certain death disturbed them more than they wanted to admit. The demonstration began at dawn, when Tundros 7's weak sun cast long shadows across the frozen training ground. Tom sat on a supply crate, wrapped in his thermal gear, watching as each alien species prepared to show why the ice wall remained. Unconquered after 8 centuries of attempts, Rek volunteered to go first for the clicks. His species had evolved on a world where reaction speed meant the difference between life and death, where predators moved faster than most beings could even perceive. Rek could dodge plasma bolts and catch projectiles out of the air with his bare hands. Surely speed and reflexes would give him an advantage against static ice. Tom watched Rek approach the wall with mechanical precision, each step calculated for maximum efficiency. The Click's compound eyes analyzed every surface detail, processing thousands of data points per second to find the optimal climbing path. His chitin armor gleamed with built-in heating elements designed to regulate body temperature in hostile environments. Rek reached the wall and began his ascent. For the first few meters, his natural advantages served him well. His reflexes let him catch himself when handholds crumbled, and his multi-jointed limbs could grip the ice at angles impossible. For most bipedal beings, his mandibles clicked rapidly as he calculated each move with computer-like precision. Then the real cold hit him. The heating elements in Rek's armor began to struggle against the wall's brutal temperature. Ice crystals formed on his compound, eyes partially blinding him. Worse, the extreme cold was slowing his reflexes, the one advantage his species prized above all others. His movements became sluggish and uncertain. "His hemolymph is beginning to crystallize," observed Vel, the void whose energy senses could detect biological processes. "The cold is affecting his circulatory system." Rek made it perhaps 20 meters up the wall before his body began shutting down. The chitin that protected him so well in normal circumstances became a liability here, conducting the killing cold directly to his vital organs. His grip faltered, then failed completely. He fell hard onto the frozen ground, his armor cracking on impact. Medical drones rushed to warm Rek while Vel stepped forward for the Void's attempt. Energy beings had different problems than flesh and blood creatures. They could theoretically adjust their molecular vibration to generate heat, phase through solid matter to avoid the worst of the climbing challenge, and manipulate electromagnetic fields to create handholds in the ice. Vel approached the wall as a shifting column of contained plasma, his humanoid form barely maintaining cohesion in the extreme cold. Energy beings were supposed to be immune to physical limitations, like temperature and fatigue. They were creatures of pure thought and will, unconstrained by biological weaknesses. The first sign of trouble came when Vel tried to phase through the ice instead of climbing over it. Something about the wall's composition interfered with his energy matrix. Instead of passing through cleanly, parts of his form became trapped in the ice while other parts remained free. Tom could see Vel struggling to maintain coherence as the cold environment played havoc with his quantum structure. The electromagnetic interference is worse than expected, Vel reported, his voice crackling with static. The ice contains mineral deposits that are disrupting my ability to maintain form stability. Vel tried to generate heat through increased molecular activity, but the energy expenditure was enormous. Within minutes, his form began flickering and dimming as he burned through his power reserves. The cold wasn't just affecting his physical capabilities, it was draining the very energy that kept him alive. He made it 30 meters up the wall before his form began destabilizing completely. Vel retreated quickly, his energy matrix barely holding together long enough to reach safe distance from the wall. Grix, one of the granite people, lumbered forward with confidence. His species had evolved on a world of extreme geological activity, where survival meant withstanding crushing pressure and molten heat. Granite people were living mountains, their stone-like bodies virtually indestructible under normal circumstances. "Watch and learn, soft ones," Grix rumbled, his voice like grinding boulders. "Stone endures where flesh and energy fail." Grix approached the wall with steady determination. His massive hands, each finger thick as Tom's arm, gripped the ice with crushing force. Where other climbers had struggled to find handholds, Grix simply created them by grinding his fingers into the ice until it conformed to his grip. For a while, it looked like brute force might succeed where finesse had failed. Grix climbed steadily upward, his stone body apparently immune to the cold that had defeated the others. His people had survived in environments that would melt most metals and crush most life forms. Surely ice couldn't stop them. But the granite. People had evolved for heat and pressure, not cold. As Grix climbed higher, the extreme temperature began affecting his mineral composition. The stone that made up his body became increasingly brittle. Stress fractures appeared along his limbs and torso. "The cold is changing his crystalline structure," Tom observed, studying Grix's movements. "He's becoming more fragile the longer. He's exposed." Grix made it 50 meters up the wall, farther than any of the others, before his body began failing catastrophically. A handhold crumbled under his grip, not because the ice gave way, but because his fingers had become too brittle. To maintain their hold, he tried to catch himself, but his joints had seized up from the cold. Grix fell like an avalanche, his stone body shattering into pieces on the frozen ground. Medical teams rushed to stabilize him while the remaining cadets stared in shock. If beings of living stone couldn't handle the cold, What hope did anyone else have? The technology demonstrations were even more frustrating. Plasma cutters created clouds of superheated steam that instantly refroze into even more treacherous ice formations. Anti-gravity devices malfunctioned when their delicate components contracted in the extreme cold. Energy shields drained their power cells in minutes, trying to maintain temperature differentials. Advanced climbing gear designed for use in vacuum conditions failed completely when ice crystals formed in the moving parts. Molecular bonding tools that could reshape matter at the atomic level simply stopped working when their operators couldn't maintain fine motor control in the killing cold. Tom watched it all with growing understanding. Every species, every technology, every approach had been designed to overcome obstacles through superior capability. The cliques used speed and precision. The voids used energy manipulation and phase shifting. The granite people used brute strength and endurance. All of their technology was built around the idea of being better than the environment they faced. But the ice wall wasn't just another obstacle to be overcome through superior force or ability. It was a puzzle that required a completely different kind of thinking. While his classmates had been trying to power through the wall's defenses, Tom had been studying its weaknesses. He pulled out a small notebook and began sketching diagrams of the wall's structure, noting the patterns of stress fractures and the way ice had formed in layers over centuries. His alien classmates might have superior bodies and advanced technology, but they were thinking about the problem all wrong. The wall wasn't their enemy. It was a tool waiting for someone smart enough to use it properly. Tom spent the evening in the Academy's temporary shelter, surrounded by equipment he had requisitioned from the supply depot. While his alien classmates recovered from their failed attempts and discussed why the ice wall was truly impossible to climb, Tom worked quietly at a makeshift laboratory table. The other cadets watched him with growing confusion. Instead of advanced climbing gear or energy weapons, Tom had gathered the most basic supplies imaginable: portable heating elements designed for warming rations, standard-issue water containers, basic metal tools that wouldn't look out of place in a primitive workshop. Most puzzling of all, he had requested several kilograms of ordinary salt from the kitchen supplies. "Human Tom," said Rec, his mandibles clicking with curiosity despite the medical wrap around his cracked chitin. "What are you building? Those components have no obvious application for wall climbing." Tom looked up from his work, where he was modifying a heating element to fit inside a metal container. "I'm not building anything complex, just putting together some tools that work with the environment instead of trying to fight it." Vel's energy form flickered with skepticism. "You cannot seriously believe that primitive heating devices will accomplish what plasma cutters could not. The wall absorbs energy and converts it to more ice. Adding heat only makes the surface more treacherous." "That's because everyone has been using heat wrong," Tom replied, carefully testing the seal on his modified container. "You've all been trying to melt the ice away. I'm going to use heat to make the ice work for me." The alien cadets exchanged looks that conveyed their shared opinion that the human had suffered some kind of mental breakdown from witnessing their failures. Grix, still recovering from having his stone body reassembled by medical nanites, rumbled his confusion. "Stone is strong, but ice broke stone. Heat makes water, water makes more ice. Human thinking makes no sense." Tom smiled and held up one of his modified containers. Steam rose from the opening, and the metal was almost too hot to handle even through his thermal gloves. Ice expands when it freezes, but it also expands when it's heated rapidly. The key is controlling the expansion. He poured a small amount of the superheated water onto a sample of ice he had chipped from the wall earlier. Instead of simply melting the ice, the rapid temperature change caused it to crack and split in a controlled pattern. Tom had added salt to the water. lowering its freezing point and allowing it to stay liquid at temperatures that would normally turn it solid. Thermal shock, Tom explained as his classmates stared at the fractured ice. When you heat something up very quickly, different parts expand at different rates. That creates stress points where the material fails in predictable ways. Instead of trying to melt through the ice, I'm going to convince it to break exactly where I want it to break. Rex's compound eyes focused on the demonstration with new interest. You are not attempting to destroy the wall. You are attempting to modify its structure. Exactly. The wall isn't my enemy. It's my raw material. Every crack and imperfection in that ice is a potential handhold, if I can just make them bigger and put them in the right places. Tom showed them his other modifications. He had reinforced several pairs of climbing gloves with heating elements and rough patches designed to grip ice. Most importantly, he had created what looked like thick mittens with heated metal claws, built into the fingertips. Paws, he said simply when Vel asked about the strange mittens. Dogs and cats can walk on ice because their paws distribute weight and maintain traction. These work on the same principle, but with added heat to prevent ice buildup. The alien cadets were beginning to understand that Tom's approach was fundamentally different from anything they had considered. While they had focused on overcoming the wall's defenses, he was planning to turn the wall's own structure against itself. The thermal expansion technique is theoretically sound, admitted Vel, his energy form stabilizing as his analytical mind engaged with the problem. But the execution requires precise timing and placement. One miscalculation could cause catastrophic, say, ice failure. Or it could create exactly the handholds I need to keep climbing, Tom countered. The trick is reading the ice structure correctly and knowing where to apply pressure. Tom spent the next several hours studying detailed photographs of the wall that the Academy's surveillance drones had captured. Unlike his classmates, who had focused on the wall's smooth, featureless appearance, Tom was looking for the subtle signs of internal structure. Variations in color that indicated different ice densities, patterns of frost accumulation that revealed airflow around stress points, tiny shadows that marked cracks too small to see with the naked eye. Your species has an unusual approach to problem solving, observed Instructor Dog, who had been monitoring Tom's preparations. Most beings either rely on evolved capabilities or technological enhancement. You appear to be using pure analysis and environmental manipulation. We're adaptation specialists, Tom replied, tracing potential climbing routes on his photographs. Humans survived on a world that tried to kill us in a dozen different ways. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, climate changes that wiped out most other species. We didn't survive because we were the strongest or fastest or toughest. We survived because we're better at changing our approach than any other species in the galaxy. He pointed to a section of the wall about 40 meters up, where the ice appeared slightly different in color and texture. See this area? The ice formation is different here, probably formed during a period when the atmospheric conditions were slightly warmer. That means it has a different crystalline structure, which means it will respond differently to thermal shock. The alien. Cadets crowded around to look at the photographs, but they couldn't see what Tom was seeing. Their enhanced senses and superior analytical capabilities were useless here because they were looking for the wrong things. They were trying to find weaknesses to exploit through force. Tom was looking for opportunities to exploit through understanding. The wall has been studied by scientists from 100 different species, said Rek. Surely someone would have noticed these structural variations before. They noticed them, Tom agreed. But they were looking at them as obstacles to overcome, not as tools to use. Everyone who has attempted this wall has been trying to impose their will on it. I'm going to work with it instead. Tom packed his equipment carefully, making sure each component was properly sealed and insulated. The heating elements were charged and tested. The saltwater solution was mixed to the proper concentration. The modified climbing gear was fitted and adjusted. Most importantly, Tom spent time mentally rehearsing his route up the wall. Unlike his alien classmates, who had relied on their superior reflexes and strength to adapt to conditions as they climbed, Tom was planning each move in advance. He knew exactly where he would apply thermal shock to create handholds, how long he would need to wait for the ice to fracture properly, and what backup options he had if his primary route failed. "You really believe this will work?" said Vel, studying Tom's preparations with something approaching respect. "I believe that 800 years of failure happened because everyone was trying to solve the wrong problem," Tom replied. "They were trying to prove they were stronger than the wall. I'm going to prove I'm smarter than everyone who came before me." As night fell over Tundros 7, Tom made his final preparations. Tomorrow, he would either become the first being in galactic history to conquer the ice wall, or he would join the long list of those who had been broken by it. But unlike all those who had failed before him, Tom wasn't planning to fight the wall. He was planning to make it fight itself. The morning air was so cold it burned Tom's lungs as he approached the ice wall. Behind him, dozens of alien cadets and academy instructors watched in fascination and horror as the human prepared to attempt what had been impossible for 8 centuries. Recording drones hovered at safe distances, their cameras capturing every moment for the academy archives. Tom stood at the base of the wall and looked up at the 300 meters of vertical ice that had defeated every species in the galaxy. This close, the wall seemed to radiate cold like a living thing. Ice crystals formed on his face mask within seconds of approaching. His thermal suit's heating elements kicked into high gear just to keep him functional. "Last chance to reconsider, human," called Instructor Dag. "Medical teams are standing by, but if you fall from significant height, there may be nothing left to recover." Tom tested his equipment one final time. The modified heating elements were working perfectly, maintaining the saltwater solution at just the right temperature. His climbing gear was secure and responsive. Most importantly, his thick insulated mittens, his paws, were keeping his hands warm and flexible despite the brutal cold. "I'm not planning to fall," Tom replied, and began his climb. He started by pouring a small amount of superheated salt water into a hairline crack he had identified near the base of the wall. The liquid hissed as it made contact with the ice, creating a small cloud of steam that froze instantly into tiny crystals. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then Tom heard the sharp crack of ice fracturing under thermal stress. The tiny crack expanded into a handhold just large enough for his fingers. Tom gripped it firmly and pulled himself up, immediately looking for the next opportunity to apply his thermal shock technique. "Incredible," whispered Vel, his energy form flickering with amazement. "He is literally reshaping the wall as he climbs." Tom's progress was slow but steady. Every few meters he would identify a stress point in the ice and apply precisely the right amount of heated salt water to create controlled fractures. Each new handhold was exactly where he needed it to be because he was creating them according to his own plan rather than hoping to find natural grips. The technique required incredible precision. Too much heat would create unstable ice that would collapse under his weight. Too little heat would fail to create usable handholds. Tom had to read the ice structure perfectly, identifying not just where it would break, but how it would break, ensuring each fracture created a grip that would support his climb to the next level. 20 meters up, Tom encountered his first major challenge. The ice here was denser and more uniform, formed during a particularly severe cold snap that had left few natural stress points to exploit. His thermal shock technique was less effective against this harder ice formation. Tom paused. hanging from his last handhold while he studied the problem. His alien observers held their breath, expecting to see the human give up or fall as the others had. Instead, Tom reached for a different tool from his kit. He pulled out what looked like a simple metal spike with a heating element built into the tip. Instead of trying to fracture the dense ice, Tom began drilling into it with controlled application of heat and pressure. The heated spike melted through the ice while the surrounding cold immediately refroze the melted water, creating a perfectly sized hole for his fingers. "He is adapting his technique to match the ice conditions," observed Rek, his mandibles clicking with what Tom had learned was admiration. Each section of wall requires a different approach. 50 meters up, Tom switched tactics again. Here, the ice was layered and brittle, formed by repeated freeze-thaw cycles that had created natural planes of weakness. Instead of creating new handholds, Tom used his heated tools to carefully expand existing microfractures, turning invisible stress points into climbing grips. The alien cadets watched in growing amazement as Tom demonstrated problem-solving skills they had never encountered before. Every species in the galaxy approached challenges the same way. Identify the obstacle, apply superior capability to overcome it. Tom was doing something entirely different. He was analyzing each section of the wall as a unique puzzle and developing custom solutions on the fly. 100 meters up, Tom faced his greatest challenge yet. The ice here was not only extremely hard and cold, but it was also smooth and featureless. 8 centuries of failed climbing attempts had worn away any natural imperfections, leaving a surface that offered no grip for conventional techniques. Tom hung from his last handhold. His breathing labored from the exertion and extreme cold. His alien observers were certain they were about to witness another failure. This was where every previous climber had been stopped, by a section of wall that seemed to offer no possibility of progress. But Tom had been expecting this obstacle. He pulled out his most innovative tool, a container of superheated salt water mixed with a special additive he had prepared the night before. Instead of looking for cracks to expand, Tom was going to create entirely new structure in the ice. He poured the solution in a careful pattern across the smooth ice above him. The liquid created a network of shallow channels as it melted into the surface. When the solution refroze, it formed raised ridges of harder ice that provided grip points where none had existed before. "He is not just modifying the wall," breathed Instructor Dog. "He is redesigning it." Tom's paws proved their worth as he climbed higher. The thick, insulated mittens with their heated claws allowed him to maintain grip and dexterity even as the temperature dropped far below what would kill most beings. Where his alien classmates had been defeated by the cold, Tom had turned it into a tool that worked for him. 150 meters up, Tom encountered ice formations that had never been seen by climbers before. No one had ever gotten this high on the wall, and the ice here told the story of weather patterns and atmospheric conditions that had persisted for centuries undisturbed. Tom paused to study these new formations, adapting his techniques yet again. Some sections required thermal shock to create handholds. Others needed drilling with heated tools. Still others could be climbed by enhancing natural features with his special ice-hardening solution. 200 meters up, Tom realized he was making history. Not just as the first being to climb this high on the ice wall, but as the first to demonstrate that human adaptability could overcome obstacles that had stopped the galaxy's most advanced species. The alien cadets below had stopped, chattering and analyzing. They were simply watching in silent awe as Tom methodically worked his way up a wall that their entire civilizations had declared unconquerable. 250 meters up, Tom could see the top of the wall. The ice here was different again. Older and more stable, formed in the earliest days of Tundra 7's frozen climate. This was ice that had never been disturbed by climbers because no one had ever gotten this far. Tom's equipment was running low. His heating elements were draining their power cells. His supply of saltwater solution was nearly exhausted. His body was pushed to its limits by the extreme cold and physical exertion. But Tom was still climbing, still adapting, still solving each new puzzle the wall presented. Where 800 years of superior alien capabilities had failed, human ingenuity was succeeding one handhold at a time. The summit of the ice wall waited just 50 meters above him, closer than any being in galactic history had ever come to achieving the impossible. The final 50 meters of the ice wall proved to be the most challenging yet. The ancient ice at the summit was unlike anything Tom had encountered during his climb. It was perfectly clear, so pure it seemed almost like crystal, and harder than any natural ice formation should have been possible. This was ice that had been compressed and refined by centuries of Tundra 7's brutal weather, creating a surface that seemed to mock every technique Tom had used to get this far. Tom hung from his last reliable handhold, studying the impossible barrier above him. His heating elements were nearly drained. His saltwater solution was down to the last few drops. His body was pushed beyond its normal limits, kept functional only by the advanced thermal suit and his own stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Below him, the alien cadets and academy instructors watched in complete silence. Recording drones hovered at maximum zoom, capturing every detail of what would either be the greatest triumph in academy history or the most spectacular failure ever recorded. Tom pulled out his last tool, a simple metal rod with a heating element that was running on the final reserves of its power cell. Instead of trying to create handholds in the crystal-clear ice, Tom began tapping gently against the surface, listening to the sound the ice made in response. "What is he doing?" whispered Rek, his compound eyes straining to track Tom's movements at this distance. Tom was reading the ice like a book written in sound and vibration. Each tap told him about the internal structure, the stress patterns, the way centuries of compression had created invisible weaknesses that could be exploited. This wasn't just climbing anymore. This was engineering at the most fundamental level. Tom found what he was looking for: a section of ice where the ancient compression had created internal stresses that were perfectly balanced. He placed his heated rod against one specific point and applied just enough thermal energy to shift that balance by the tiniest amount. The ice didn't crack. It didn't fracture. Instead, it began to reshape itself as the internal stresses redistributed. Microscopic changes in crystal structure created new pathways for Tom's heated tools to follow. The wall was essentially helping him climb by rearranging its own atomic structure. "Impossible," breathed Instructor Dog. "He is making the wall climb itself." Tom worked his way up the final section with painful slowness, each movement calculated, to work with the ice's natural tendencies rather than against them. His paws gave him the precise grip control he needed to take advantage of handholds that were barely larger than pencil marks. His understanding of thermal dynamics let him create climbing routes in ice that seemed solid and featureless. 20 meters from the summit, Tom's equipment finally failed completely. His heating elements died. His thermal tools went cold. Even his advanced paws were beginning to lose their effectiveness as ice built up on their surfaces. Tom was alone with the wall, depending entirely on his own body and mind to complete the impossible climb. The alien observers were certain they were about to witness a tragic failure, just meters short of victory. But Tom had planned for this moment. Throughout his climb, he had been studying not just the ice he was climbing through, but the ice he was leaving behind. Every handhold he had created, every modification he had made to the wall's structure had been designed to serve double duty as both climbing aid and heat source. The handholds Tom had carved into the lower sections of the wall were still radiating the thermal energy he had put into them hours ago. By carefully positioning his body, Tom could absorb just enough of that residual heat to keep his hands functional and prevent his blood from freezing in his veins. Tom climbed the final 20 meters using nothing but his own understanding of physics, his knowledge of ice formation, and the handholds he had created during his ascent. Every grip was a tool he had built specifically for this moment. Every technique was one he had developed through careful analysis of the wall's unique properties. 10 meters from the summit, Tom paused to look down at the alien cadets far below. From this height, they looked like tiny insects scattered across the frozen ground. But Tom could see them clearly, dozens of beings from the galaxy's most advanced species, all watching a simple human accomplish what their superior evolution and technology had declared impossible. Tom reached the summit of the ice wall just as Tundra 7's weak sun reached its highest point in the sky. He pulled himself over the final edge and stood on top of the 300-meter cliff that had been unconquerable for 8 centuries. The view from the summit was breathtaking. The frozen landscape of Tundra 7 stretched to the horizon in every direction. A world of ice and wind and impossible beauty. But Tom wasn't looking at the scenery. He was looking down at the wall he had just climbed, studying the route he had carved through the ice. From above, Tom could see the full pattern of his ascent. Every handhold he had created, every modification he had made to the wall's structure, formed a complex network that told the story of human problem-solving at its finest. It wasn't just a climbing route, it was a masterpiece of adaptive engineering. The alien cadets below were shouting and celebrating, their voices carrying clearly in the thin air. But Tom could hear something else in their celebration, a note of confusion and unease that hadn't been there before. They were celebrating his victory, but they were also beginning to understand what that victory truly meant. Tom activated his communicator and spoke to the assembled crowd below. The ice wall has been conquered, but more importantly, it has been understood. Every species that attempted this climb was trying to overcome the wall through superior capability. I succeeded by making the wall work for me instead of against me. The silence that followed was profound. Tom could see the alien instructors conferring among themselves, their body language conveying shock and something approaching concern. They had expected the ice wall to remain unconquerable forever. Tom's success had shattered assumptions that had stood for centuries. "Human Tom," came Instructor Dag's voice over the communicator. "Please describe your descent strategy. The wall surface has been significantly modified by your ascent techniques." Tom smiled as he looked down the route he had climbed. "That's the best part. I don't need a descent strategy. I've turned the ice wall into a staircase." It was true. Every handhold Tom had created during his ascent could be used by climbers coming after him. His thermal shock techniques had left a permanent network of grips and footholds carved into the ice. His ice-hardening solutions had created stable climbing surfaces that would last for years. Most importantly, his route planning had created multiple paths up the wall, each designed for different climbing styles and capabilities. "You have not just conquered the wall," observed Vel, his energy form flickering with what Tom recognized as awe. "You have made it conquerable for others." That was when the real implications of Tom's achievement became clear to everyone watching. The human hadn't just solved an impossible problem, he had solved it in a way that made it no longer impossible. The ice wall would never again be the unconquerable barrier it had been for 8 centuries. Tom began his descent using the route he had carved into the wall. Where his alien classmates would have needed complex equipment and careful planning to safely descend 300 meters of vertical ice, Tom simply climbed down, using the handholds he had created on the way up. Each grip was exactly where he needed it to be because he had put it there himself. Halfway down, Tom encountered Rek climbing up to meet him. The Click Cadet was using Tom's route with ease, his natural climbing abilities finally able to find purchase on the modified wall surface. "This is extraordinary," Rek said, his mandibles clicking with excitement. "Your handholds are perfectly positioned for multiple climbing styles. A Void could use the larger grips you created in the lower sections. A Granite person could use the deeper holes you drilled in the middle sections. You have made the wall accessible to every species." Tom nodded as he continued his descent. "That was the point. I wasn't just trying to get myself to the top. I was trying to solve the fundamental problem that made the wall unclimbable. Every species was failing because they were fighting the wall instead of working with it." By the time Tom reached the ground, half a dozen alien cadets were already climbing his route toward the summit. Vel was phasing through the ice more easily now that Tom's modifications had created stable reference points for his energy form. Grix was making steady progress using the deeper handholds Tom had drilled specifically for beings with massive hands. "In 800 years of Academy history," said Instructor Dog, "no cadet has ever solved a problem in a way that made it easier for others to solve the same problem. Your approach to the ice wall represents a fundamentally different kind of thinking." Tom pulled off his thermal gear and accepted a hot drink from one of the Academy staff. Around him, alien cadets were discussing his climb with a mixture of admiration and concern that he found fascinating. "Your species does not just adapt to challenges," observed Vel, who had returned from a successful ascent of Tom's route. "You transform challenges into opportunities for others. This is a dangerous capability." "Dangerous how?" Tom asked, genuinely curious about the alien perspective. Rek answered, his compound eyes reflecting complex thoughts. "Most species develop advantages that benefit only themselves. Superior strength helps only the strong. Enhanced technology helps only those with access to that technology. But what you have done benefits everyone who comes after you. This kind of problem-solving could change entire civilizations." Tom was beginning to understand why his alien classmates seemed unsettled by his success. In a galaxy where every species had evolved specialized advantages for their own survival, humans represented something entirely new. A species whose greatest strength was making things easier for everyone else. The ice wall was never really about climbing, Tom realized aloud. It was about testing how different species approach impossible problems. Most species try to overcome obstacles through individual superiority. Humans try to eliminate obstacles entirely. Instructor Dog nodded slowly. "This is why your species was invited to join the Academy. Your approach to problem-solving represents capabilities that the galaxy has never seen before. The question now is whether those capabilities will be used to benefit the galactic community or to dominate it." Tom looked back at the ice wall, where alien cadets were still using his route to reach heights that had been impossible just hours before. Each successful climb validated his approach and demonstrated the power of adaptive thinking over specialized evolution. "We'll see," Tom said simply. "But if you wanted to know how humans approach impossible problems, now you know. We don't just solve them. We make sure they stay solved for everyone who comes after us." The alien cadets exchanged glances that conveyed their shared realization. They had invited humanity into the galactic community expecting to gain another ally with useful military capabilities. Instead, they had discovered a species that could fundamentally change how problems were solved throughout the galaxy. Whether that change would be beneficial or terrifying remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same now that humans had shown what was possible when someone refused to accept that anything was truly impossible.